Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. So, in this video, I'm going to try and talk about a recent event that is occurring as we speak. I was asked my thoughts on this issue. And quite frankly, I got to tell you, I'm a little bit hesitant about doing the video. The reason I am hesitant about doing the video about what is occurring in the trial of Mr. Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, is unreasonable persons and persons relying on emotion and not looking at the laws of the United States of America. And it's important to try and separate emotion from the facts which occurred on the ground. And I don't really want to get into the political divide of the issue. Obviously, one exists for some people, others it's clear cut, and it really doesn't. But my opinion regarding whether Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty or not guilty is really irrelevant. It really is. And you have to look at the facts on the ground. And you have to understand the basic idea behind defending yourself in the United States. And there's many countries in the world where you cannot utilize a firearm to defend yourself. It is strictly a device to be used in hunting, in what have you, or a sporting event. And it specifically is not to be used to even defend yourself. And you could find yourself in trouble if that were to be the case. In the United States, that is not the case. And again, the law is very, very specific regarding you as a citizen defending yourself. So I don't want to get into every law in every state because they're a little different. Some are obviously the wording is a little different, but what I'm going to try to do is just give you the basic idea in the United States of when you can use a firearm to defend yourself. And it's really simple. It really is. And it is simply this. If you reasonably believe that you or a third person is going to suffer serious bodily injury, and a serious bodily injury would be a broken bone or laceration, and obviously you could also fear for death as well by suffering serious bodily injury. So again, if you reasonably believe that you or a third person, it just doesn't have to be you, it can also be a third person, is going to suffer death or serious bodily injury, then you can use deadly physical force with a firearm. Now, obviously, if you are going to have a firearm and you are going to use a firearm, you have to be very, very, you have to understand that you honestly believe, you reasonably believe that you are going to suffer death or a serious bodily injury, and it's crucial. Now, what was happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin? So, you had large-scale riots of Antifa, the anti-fascist movement, and you had another group that was assisting Antifa known as the People's Revolutionary Front, and that is also a fairly far left organization that looks to conduct direct action. And a lot of these direct action incidences that was occurring inside of Kenosha, Wisconsin, was the use of Molotov cocktails. So, contrary to popular belief, on the emotional side of the equation, if you walk up to a structure that is inhabited by people, that citizens, and you take a firebomb, a Molotov cocktail, and you hurl that Molotov cocktail or firebomb at someone or a building that someone is occupying, then you can reasonably assume that that person is trying to kill you with a firebomb. It's not a property crime. It is a property crime, but it can also be a serious crime against an individual person. You are firebombing a structure in which that person is residing or maintaining a business, and you can then kill them. So in that sort of instance, obviously you can use deadly physical force against someone who's throwing a firebomb at a business. And the group that was also in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was a group that had armed itself because the police had withdrawn and were no longer protecting property, were no longer protecting businesses, and they were also no longer protecting the people inside of those businesses, inside of those residences that were being firebombed by this other group. So, with that being said, if you're going to hurl a Molotov cocktail, a firebomb at someone, then you could probably expect to be engaged by gunfire if you do that. Now, the three gentlemen that were shot, the first one was Mr. Rosenbaum. Now, this information that I'm going to talk about, the three individuals who were shot by Rittenhouse, a lot of this information is not making it to trial. The judge has deemed that the jury does not need to hear about the criminal records of the three individuals who were shot by Rittenhouse. And I think it's important to understand that in this case, the criminal record does have meaning. And I'll try to explain further after I tell you about these guys' criminal records. So the first person who was shot was Joseph Rosenbaum. And the big issue for him is that Mr. Rosenbaum had spent 15 years in prison. I believe it was reduced to 10 years because Mr. Rosenbaum liked to take his erect sexual organ and insert his sexual organ, his penis, into the anus of 5 small children, ages of 9 through 11. So again, Mr. Rosenbaum, prior felon, who again felt that he had to insert his sexual organs into the anus of small children. And he spent time in prison for that. The day of the shooting, Rosenbaum was discharged from the hospital for a suicide attempt. So he was not in a very good psychiatric state of mind. The next individual, Anthony Huber, again, and also was charged with felonies to include strangulation, suffocation, and false imprisonment. And he took a plea deal, which reduced that. And these assaults, these felony assaults, were made against his siblings and his, quite possibly his grandparents. The third person, Grosskreutz, the sole surviving victim, he was shot in the arm by Rittenhouse, was actually armed with a handgun and pointed the handgun at Rittenhouse when he was shot in the arm by Rittenhouse. And Grosskreutz also has criminal record and was also a person of interest in a felony burglary in 2012. And he has various minor offenses as well. So all three of these guys have a criminal record. ironically, the lesser of which, Grosskreutz, was only wounded, and he had the lesser of the criminal records between all three. The two that were killed, Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber, all had apparently committed felony acts in their past. Now, with that being said, I think it is reasonable that you have to look at these records. If you've never interacted and had to deal with someone that I would define as a mad dog, and a mad dog is just a completely irrational human being that is looking to hurt you for no really apparent reason, and you cannot negotiate with them, you cannot talk to them. That is what Joseph Rosenbaum, the child rapist, appeared to be that night, a mad dog. And again, if you look at his history, he has a history of making really poor decisions, like taking his erect sexual organ and forcing it into the anus of a child. That is a bad decision. Same with Anthony Huber. When you try to strangle your sister, that is probably a bad decision. So again, we have a history of bad decision-making processes. And again, the first person who was shot that night was Rosenbaum. And in the video, you can clearly see he is chasing Rittenhouse, who has, yes, an AR-15. It is not illegal to possess an AR-15. That was one component of this that the media got wrong, that stipulated that Rittenhouse was illegally carrying a firearm. That is not the case. The barrel length of the firearm was within the stated requirements for the state of Wisconsin, and he was 17 years old, and he could carry that weapon. Now, was it a great idea to do that? Would I let my children, would I let my 17-year-old child go to an event with an AR-15? Probably not. Okay. But at the same time, we were dealing with a time and an ongoing time in our country in which things are just really getting out of hand and becoming irrational. And especially when you have businesses being burnt down, and on one side it would appear that no one is making an effort in terms of law enforcement to protect businesses, to protect the people inside of those businesses, in those residences, as the Antifa movement and this People's Revolutionary Front are rampaging through the streets, taking items, looting, stealing, and burning down property, and quite possibly could have very easily killed a person with these Molotov cocktails. These are dangerous devices. And what I think happened is I believe that Rittenhouse looks like a very young person. And I believe that Joseph Rosenbaum, being a mad dog, being a child rapist, probably thought that he could, in the best terms, punk Rittenhouse. Rosenbaum saw Rittenhouse as an easy victim, somebody who probably was not going to use the AR-15 that he carried. And as he has made mistakes by inserting his erect sexual organ inside of the anus of small children, he made a mistake that night and got himself killed. And again, when you are being chased by a mad dog who is threatening to take your gun and use it on you, what do? Well, at that point in time, it would appear that Rittenhouse reasonably believed that he was going to be killed or suffer serious bodily injury from this mad dog, Joseph Rosenbaum. And I use that term because you have to look at his prior criminal history. Anybody who would do that to a small child is a mad dog. If you disagree, you can. The next person who was shot was Anthony Huber. Anthony Huber, at the time of being shot by Mr. Rittenhouse, was taking a skateboard and trying to bludgeon Mr. Rittenhouse, who was on the ground. Anthony Huber was over Rittenhouse with a skateboard, striking Rittenhouse with the skateboard. A skateboard can be seen as a deadly weapon, especially when you're using it to bludgeon someone. So while Rittenhouse laid on the ground, seeing this skateboard come down upon him, again, go back to the law of the land. If you reasonably believe that yourself or a third person is going to suffer death or serious bodily injury, you can use deadly physical force. And naturally, by Mr. Anthony Huber using that skateboard to bludgeon Rittenhouse is what got him shot. The third person, this is really cut and dry, is Grosskreutz. He, while Huber was engaging him with the skateboard, if you watch the video, he comes up within that time period and pulls out a concealed weapon, which he did not have a concealed carry permit, and points it at Rittenhouse. And again, if someone points a gun at you, you can reasonably assume that you're going to suffer death or serious bodily injury. And that's what happened. Now, the irrational side will look at Rittenhouse walking down the street carrying the AR-15, and I know it's something that is not normal. People normally don't see people walking down the street carrying AR-15s, but it was not a normal night. You had these two other factions, Antifa and the People's Revolutionary Front, burning down businesses, and that's why those folks were there with those. Kyle Rittenhouse was not the only person there with a long rifle. There were other persons there with long rifles to defend these businesses, and you can do that if the police pull back, and these businesses and people inside of the businesses are now the possibility of being killed or suffering serious bodily injury by these Molotov cocktails. Someone can defend those businesses, and that's what they were doing. And that's what happened. So yes, based on the evidence that I see, based on what happened that night, based on the character of the three individuals that went after Rittenhouse, all of which had criminal records, very serious criminal records as well. In fact, if you look at Rosenbaum's record inside of prison, it's even worse. He has numerous charges against him in prison for various assaults and what have you inside of prison as well. So again, the first guy who really kicked all this off, Rosenbaum, just a complete and utter mad dog. And quite honestly, in retrospect, if we fast forward it, 10 years into the future, and he already has a history of sexually assaulting 5 different children, ages 9 to 11. Maybe this wasn't a bad thing, Maybe someone's child, quite possibly, will not be sexually assaulted now by this mad dog Rosenbaum. So just a thought, and that's my opinion on the whole situation. And there it is. Have a great day, everybody.